Alan Eckhart. I saw Alan Eckhart. His topic, his lecture was 1001 rejection slips. And that's what he talked about. And so talk about perseverance and success. You know,
we have to persevere. And speaking of perseverance, we are live on Facebook. I believe this is all working out. I hope we have some people joining us who've come back from last week's failed stream, and you're with us this morning for our discussion of the second chapter of Swedenborg's work, New Jerusalem. And I'm so pleased this morning to be joined by Karen, coming here from California. Want to say hi, Karen?
Hey.
Oh, there she is. There she is. And Robin is coming to us from Urbana, Ohio. Want to say hello, Robin?
mm-hmm.
And we were all commenting on how we all have deep ties to Urbana, Ohio, and are happy to be sharing those. And we have some people joining us online saying hello. Yay. Hi, Renee. Hi, Catherine.
Oh, hurrah.
Hey, anyone else who is lingering for our conversation today. And this week, we are going to get into goodness and truth. If you joined last week, we started off with, this is the New Jerusalem. The New Jerusalem is an image of this new church that we're all seeking to be a part of. And this book that Swedenborg put together is seeking to kind of let us know what are the essentials of this new church. And we can think of the church as the organization that we are all a part of that seeks to lift up this vision of the new church. We can think of the new church as the new us, the new us's, the new life that we're all, not just those of us within the society, but kind of humanity as a whole kind of are seeking to embrace and open up to as God is growing us, regenerating us. And this new church, as we talked about last week, Swedenborg saw this happening about 300 years ago. He saw a new heaven starting to form. This new heaven is a heaven of Christians and non-Christians. This is a new heaven of all people who are living good lives by the best they know. And this new heaven is also then going to manifest into a new earth, into a new physical reality that we're a part of. So this week we get started with, what is this new life about? What is this church about? What is central? And the place where Swedenborg starts is, and I'm going to read this section from the very first number of this chapter. Nothing is more necessary for us than knowing what goodness and what truth is, and how each focuses on the other, as well as how each becomes joined to the other. It is particularly necessary, though, for people of the church, because just as everything in heaven goes back to what is good and what is true, so does everything in the church. So let's start with goodness. Robin and Karen, from this reading and then just from your own experience, what do we know about what goodness is? Either of you want to jump into that?
I'll go ahead and give it a go. The first thing I wrote down about goodness and truth when I was reading this was, goodness is the reality underlying something.
Mm-hmm.
And truth is how that thing becomes manifest from goodness.
Mm-hmm.
So let's try and put that into some kind of a sentence or two that tries to make some sense out of that.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness is surely what we do, as opposed to what we just think about. It's part of it's our intent, right? The will, but it is surely something we do. And truth is what is underlying that and manifesting it. So I guess for me, it comes back down to what I do, what I intend and what I do.
Mhm.
And if it's driven by truth, it's the real deal.
Mhm. Something in goodness that has to do with, and Renee has the question, what kind of reality? What is this underlying reality? This is to me what is really important is that the what does underlying reality even mean? My word is, what is the substance of things? Like what are we all made of? And that Swedenborg would say we are all made of love, that love is like the essence of who we are. And goodness is related to love. It's like the heat, like the energy of life is this goodness, the good. And I think of the first chapter of Genesis, that God calling everything good, that the created universe is created from this good, loving substance that, and I can't remember if I said this last week in the discussion or on Sunday, but like, we think often so much about like good and evil, good and falsity, that there's these like competing positive and negative. But if you kind of just like sit back and look at the universe, what does that have to do with good and evil? Like, it's just magnificent. It's just amazing that on one level, it's all coming from this good place, this loving, longing essence of what is good. And that's a really big model, but then like I wanted to bring it back to be really practical and small, that like, what does that mean right now? Like, what's good right now? Like, I was eating an orange earlier and like, would it be good to just take it and like smash it on my face? Like, no, that would be stupid. That would be ridiculous. But there's this goodness that it contains within it that I have access to, insofar as I peel it and put it in my mouth and enjoy the taste, and that's sort of how we kind of participate with goodness. Renee's has some other great comments on here I want to read. Goodness seeks to bless without thought of reward or recompense. Ooh, that's lovely. And goodness seeks to unite and connect, not sever. That was a part of this chapter and the previous chapter, talking about how in the new church, the new heaven, everything is connected. Nothing is disconnected. Everything flows into the other. And so it's good for me to eat the orange and appreciate the orange and not waste its gift. And when
it's pleasurable too. It's actually has nutrition. So not only does it taste good, but it's good for you. Yeah.
Right. Pleasurable, nutritious, useful to my body.
Beautiful to look at.
Beautiful to look at. So many things.
Used as an astringent. So you might possibly be able to use it on your skin. If you smash it on your face.
But yeah, a good thought about the it's all there, it's all connected. And when we look at the grand scheme of the universe, we can see how it's all working together and it's all the systems. And yet in our humanness, we have the freedom to make all kinds of choices that disconnect us and that don't bring us together. Here's another one from Barb. Goodness then also has laws that govern. Interesting. So that goodness, there are sort of, and maybe it is a law maybe to peel the orange and eat the orange. Like there are, and we can see this in animal life and in plant life, the ecosystems function through laws that help everything to work together. It's just us humans that have the ability to break all those rules because we're so special. What else about goodness? Renee also says goodness is soft, not hard. And I heard that I read that part in the ancillary information where it talks about truth without goodness can be very harsh. So yeah, goodness creates a softness, a suppleness.
What I was thinking is goodness is also a loving action or intention toward another or coming from a place of love. and that's goodness.
Mhm. Yeah.
It's interesting that I had a friend, and we were having a similar conversation about good and bad, and that most people would know. I thought the difference between good and bad, and she said no. She thought that some people don't, and she had given me some examples, and I said, well, that's mental illness for you or something. But she was really serious, and it really kind of took me aback because I know this friend is relatively, she's pretty religious herself, that she couldn't identify between good and bad.
Mhm.
And so, in Swedenborg, I guess I had to really think about that there's all this deeper level or undercurrent, as we were saying, that goes along with that. And to me, it was just a given, but I guess some people don't read that or decipher that as easily as other people, oddly enough.
Mhm. Well, and Swedenborg's very clear that we are, we may hope that we have a good reference point, and I think as we become regenerated, we get even more sensitive to the good. But we're all caught up in a falsity, and I think the truth is that goodness can be expressed in a lot of ways. Maybe I need this as an astringent on my face. Maybe I need to eat this orange. Maybe someone else needs this orange that isn't getting it. There are in part of the world we've created with our freedom to move away from the good, to kind of get more caught up in our thinking minds versus really focusing on the good. It's not always so clear. We don't live in an immediate reality where we're always tuned in to ourselves, the people around us, and just sort of responding, oh, what's good here. It's often really complex, trying to sort out
I
what
think
the
it's
good
also
is.
very murky because we have so much falsity in the world, but we're being bombarded by it, with social media or any kind of media and
Mhm.
other things that I could see that it really clouds. I feel like sometimes that we live in that cloud of
Mhm.
murkiness. And so maybe to be able to really decipher what's truly good and true, does make it much more challenging when we have to clear that fog and all
Mhm.
those things out of our way to really say, oh, this is truth and goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking a lot about goodness in regards to need, that part of what makes goodness connect everything together and create this unity is that goodness is responsive to what is needed in ourselves or what is needed in others. What is the good here? What is the highest good?
But
And
even then, you still have to decipher if that is the true thing that you need, because people fall into addictions because
sure.
they think they need
Mhm.
to self medicate or
Mhm.
do whatever they're doing that's actually toxic in
Yeah.
this name of need, and they think it's good for them, and
Yeah.
so that is even a bit of a
Another
challenge.
example of how it's become really complicated. I mean, I really feel like at 46, I'm like just starting to be sensitive to what my needs are. I'm like just starting to pay attention to, oh, you're tired, aren't you? Oh, you need a snack. Like we're so, and I'm realizing it's because I've been so shaped to not really pay attention to that, but to focus on fulfilling the requirements of the world around me and doing a good job and being good and being capable and all of those things. And I'm having to relearn kind of the simpleness of the goodness that's needed. And I feel like that's probably true for us as a world right now, um, is the expectations of the good. And the church has certainly played a role in this. Better be good. What does good mean? It means showing up for church, or it means fulfilling these obligations or these obligations, versus that sort of more subtle. Oh, Barb, thank you for your honesty. She says she's just learning it at 74. Yeah, it's never too late. We're all just learning how to feed into
Well,
ourselves.
I think it would do the church good to do a little restructuring on their
Yeah.
teaching, like teaching self-care and mindfulness, because mindfulness will help you to get back into your body and to pay attention to what it needs and what kind of care it needs and all that stuff. And I think that would go a long way towards being able to walk that path of goodness and truth as well. Because it
Yeah,
also, if the divine is within and you're not even paying attention to when you're hungry or hurting, then you're not paying attention to the divine within you. You're not
exactly.
even going that
Exactly.
deep.
That feels very central to me about what the call of the new church is, that it's not fulfilling an external obligation, but it's allowing this growth within, and it's going to require that listening.
You can't teach something
That-
that you don't know yourself.
And you can't teach something you don't know yourself.
No, that's right.
Debbie mentions on here too that one way to think about the good too is how we approach others and looking for the good in each other. I know that's in the affirmation of faith we use here. We talk about loving the goodness in our neighbor. You know, sometimes it's hard to love each other, and sometimes we have a lot of people. We do things that hurt one another. But thinking about that we all have this goodness within us can help us to remember, oh, that's what I'm loving. I'm loving the good that you essentially are. Even if the things you're doing are making me very angry, there is this kernel of goodness in you and really in everything, in all of life that we love. And as we love each other in that way, we can become connected even when there's a lot of disconnection on maybe the truth side of things.
I like to do this little visualization technique. Sometimes when I'm feeling bad or negative about a situation or people or whatever, the world in general, I like to visualize all of us in heaven with God, and knowing that it's just pure love, and all these falsities fall away from us, and we just all love each other. And so then to see my enemy or this person I'm having conflict with in that light, in the true light, that we just love each other, it totally sometimes makes me cry. And this really diffuses that anger or irritation, whatever it is I'm feeling at that time.
Yeah.
To visualize that.
Thank
It's
you,
like
Rob.
it's like imagining us all in the holy city together.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really important to remember. And I would add to that, I do some meditations sort of similar to that. And I often also then put myself in there with all of the crappy feelings that I'm struggling with, you know, because sometimes I'm like, okay, I gotta love her. And then but then I'm damning myself for having a negative reaction or having a whatever. And it's like, oh, even I get to be in there too. You know, I'm also lovable. I also have that wholeness within me that I might be alienated from at the moment because of the circumstances, but it's still there. And there's nothing I can do to harm that part of myself. It's always there. It's always okay. That really, I find that very helpful.
Yeah.
Should we talk about truth a little bit?
Okay.
And how they connect? One thing I want to bring up, and this is sort of off topic a little bit, but I was going down some rabbit holes getting ready for this week, and was reading in the Arcana about all the stories in the Bible about the firstborn and the secondborn, you know, Jacob and Esau and different, and there's always this tension between who's going to be the firstborn and who's going to be the secondborn. And Swedenborg talks about that's the tension between good and truth, and that there's always been this tension throughout the history of humanity. What leads? Should goodness lead or should truth lead? And that if we've been in an era where truth has really been leading, that we've, you know, maybe we had that instinctual goodness when we were first kind of evolving, but over time, as our minds got more expansive and our thoughts got bigger, it became important for us to have these strong truths that lead and that helped us to remember the good. And ultimately, though, while truth has been in the lead, as we grow and as we regenerate, goodness takes over again. And that we need to kind of come back to, because sometimes those truths can lead us astray, you know, and we've seen how truth can create conflict and when it becomes very hard or harsh. So I just wanted to share that because I felt that I wonder about that for myself. You know, is there a truth that I really need to hold to get connected to what is good? Or is there a goodness that I want to become more sensitive to? And maybe let some of the truth go for a minute. I wondered if you guys had thoughts about that.
Actually, that does remind me of something that I wrote down. I wrote down number 15, that particular passage, the joining together of goodness and truth, and what it reminded me of. So I don't know how familiar you guys are with the 12-step program. Sure. I was in it for many years, and now and on, because my late husband was an alcoholic. But it actually has a Swedenborgian influence, if you didn't know that.
Yes.
which is really interesting because I did not know Swedenborg at the time in the early years that I was there in that program. But to see new people in recovery, most particularly people that have the addict, the addiction versus the family members, they come in there and it's interesting. They really literally have never learned how to live life on life's terms. So they're like babies. And if they really want to do the recovery and they really work the 12 steps and do what um, they're told a lot. There's a couple of phrases, slogans. They have to be taught to do the next right thing, and they're also taught to fake it till they make it. So it's like they don't even know right from wrong or what to do. Just do the next right thing in that moment of your life, and they follow that. And then the fake it till you make it is, even though you don't care, you have no good intentions, you can't love other people because they don't even love themselves. Just fake it till you make it. And the rest of the group is such an emotional support for these people as they walk these simple steps, do the next right thing and fake it till you make it. And if they really work it because they really intentionally want it, it's amazing the transformation that takes place over time. They begin to not only do the next right thing, and part of that is they're encouraged to do service work, helping others, that they become to discover that they like it and they even love doing service work. So this doing the next right thing because they're told to do it becomes just something that they love and they want to do. And faking it till they make it, they make it to this point where gradually over time they love helping others. They begin to love themselves, and then they can begin to love other people, and they find the divine within them, because a lot of them don't have that. And so it's just amazing how over time, with the right intention and will, it merges and blends together really beautifully. And this part of the section really made me think of this merging of goodness and truth. You don't have to have it in the beginning, but you have to want it enough and just do it. And it's just an amazing thing.
It's amazing. And I wonder if you don't have to have it within you, but I do wonder with the success of the 12 steps, if part of what makes it so successful is you have it around you. Because people are gathering in that goodness. If it was just in a book telling you, fake it till you make it, I don't think it would have the same effect. It's because it's human beings showing that it is possible to live.
Carrying that person along as they fake it.
It's a great example, Robin. I feel like AA definitely kind of, it is regeneration. It's a group that's focused on supporting spiritual growth and creating a container. And there's a very powerful, practical model for how to grow.
It played a huge impact in my own life.
Yeah, sometimes truth needs to take the lead when you really don't feel any goodness. Maybe you feel just totally worthless. You have none of that sense of love in you. And you just need someone to tell you, okay, this is what's true, and just keep doing this.
Yes.
Eventually that love grows, and eventually you feel it, and then it can shift. And if we're in a time where the truth feels really strong, but then the love is missing, then we have to, it's a marriage, as he talks about.
Yes, that's what it made me think of. Yeah.
And if anyone's been married, marriage is like 90-10 and then 10-90, it's never like 50-50. It's exchanging of we've had some good comments in the comment section too. From Rebecca, offered a great quote about flexibility and solidity, that truth can be very solid, goodness is flexible. Truth can become too solid and be harsh. Probably goodness would be too, if goodness had no form, how would we connect with it? The whole point of creation is to create life that can be connected. So we need the solidity, but we need the flexibility, and the two in balance is what we're all kind of seeking. Any other thoughts about truth from you, Karen?
Well, one of the things that I wrote down that hit me smack between the eyes was, okay, maybe I didn't write it down. It's someplace Swedenborg says that people who are so focused on truth to the exclusion of everything else, don't even see the places in the word where the Lord talks about loving and caring and how important it is. And there's a fine example of light without warmth. Nothing will grow. Everything's dormant and then nothing will grow in that bright winter sunlight because it's cold. And that someplace else he says truth is terrifying.
Yeah, someone in the comments
Oh
mentioned
my
how
goodness.
truth can be really hard. It can be painful, depending on our state and what we're caught up in. I do like to remind myself that I think sometimes like the truth becomes like this very lofty thing. Like, what is the truth? That it's like, I sometimes I like picture like books floating in the sky or whatever. It's like, the truth is just what is so. The truth is what is ultimately actually happening. True.
And that
It's-
can be
it's-
confusing too.
Say that
That can
again.
be, that can be tricky too.
Mhm.
What is truth? Because in NVC, nonviolent communication, you learn to look at situations, conflicts or whatever they are, because we tend to put our judgment and our biases to
Yes.
what is.
Yes.
So if a situation happens, somebody cuts in front of you,
Mhm.
your bias or in your mind, you're thinking they made me run off over to the curb. They made me do this or they did that. And she teaches us to look at whatever the situation is without audio, just as if there was just a camera with no audio. What would the camera show?
Yeah.
And that
Oh,
is the truth.
huh.
That is the truth. So you take away all that stuff that's going on in here, and that's gone. And this
Yeah.
is the truth. And it looks different.
Well, that's just it. The truth is what is ultimately so.
Mhm.
And all of us have different perspectives on that. You know,
Mhm.
what is ultimately so is the giant elephant, and we're all touching like one little point.
And we have
So
to be careful
my
about
opinion
that.
of the truth, my observation of what is true is going to be totally different from other people. And this is what creates all human conflict. And it's what gives us amazing human potential, because if we can stop seeing other people's truths as an enemy, we can start to see that other people's perspectives and truths are giving us a new dimension on the whole picture. And that to me also is really central to the new church vision. How do we listen to each other? And I think there's another thing about truth that came to me in a book I was reading that I thought was so smart. And this is a book called Finite and Infinite Games. And he has a section in there where he says, truth is being truthful and honest is not about candor, but it's about vulnerability. We've gotten really good as human species, I think, around like, this is my truth, and I'm gonna tell you what it is. And
Mhm.
this is how it all goes down. And this is what happened. And this is what caused this. You know, we've kind of, in our desire to be safe, have like, we want to know what's true. But like Sue mentioned this, you know, truth does not always need to be expressed. Truth, what's really true is not about candor. I mean, sure, you can have an opinion, whatever, but what actually is having an effect on the world? What is actually true for you versus your opinions and your judgments about everybody? I really feel like that's an important turning in terms of thinking about truth is, I mean, I don't know. I don't know if cander's run its course in 2023. I'm guessing it's not. We're still going to all blather our opinions all over the internet. But one thing really central, I think, about how Swedenborg talks about truth and how we really probably should hold it as a church is that it's got to be connected to truth. It's got to be connected to love. It's got to be actionable. It's got to be useful. So when we have an opinion, is it useful? Is there a way to have that opinion or have that perspective and think about how to make it useful versus just have this need to be heard and to be the one that knows, which is a strong temptation. Yeah. Yeah, and Renee's bringing up some more points about when is it appropriate to speak truth? When is it appropriate to be silent? A lot of wisdom speakers, I think a lot of wise ones from all the ages sort of talk about like the more you know, the less you need to speak. That wisdom, as it grows, you begin to realize how much you don't know, and that it's actually, when we're kind of young and cocky, we're sort of more willing to say that we know everything. But as we grow, we become more humble and more uncertain. But sometimes we're also really called to speak truth, right? And that's also what can move the world forward and move relationships forward, continuing to letting things be true that really have a lot of life, and that you're not voicing, or that you're not seeking to bring into the world, and you're squashing, I think also is problematic. There's a balance between speaking and being silent. Yeah.
I was thinking that I have also read a book that was really important to me on a matter of truth, or truth speaking. My truth is Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he talks about that too. He uses this analogy of everybody has their own little movie theater. We all know this, if it's our family member, we know a lot of the characters, but the way I view as the situation or people, my sister would view differently. And so they act different, and they, like you said, we have different perspectives. And so everything changes when you think about my truth versus someone else's truth. And since I've been involved in the MVC program, I like their stance on it, that to not tell people necessarily what you think is the truth or what will help them or whatever, but because people do need to be heard, to just listen. Although you can ask first, as opposed to saying, this is the truth, this is what you should do, or this is the way it is. You might ask if they want to hear what you have to say, or what your ideas are on the truth, or whatever it is, and then respect whatever answer they give you, if they say yeah or if they say no. Because I think everybody has their own truth, and even if it's the same, it might change based on,
over time.
I don't know, whatever.
Cassie's brought us a good question that I think we could sit with, from 25.3. She was quoting, any truths that do not come from the Lord come from our own selves and are not true, even though they seem to be true. How do we always make the distinction if the truth is kind and loving? How do we know when truth is coming from God or truth is coming from ourselves?
Question.
My take on that one is we don't know. And so we should be humble. And that but that on some level, we are all, what is the Lord? What is God? God is the creator of all. So God created us. So we are created in God's image. So we have something to bring to the table. Something of truth is in our life, in our being, and wherever we've been born, the intersection of life that we come into, the people around us, the world around us, the politics around us, we have been born, with particular traumas, particular strengths. And so we have something to bring, something that's true about what's actually going on that no one else can bring, that no one else sees or knows. And that's where I feel like if we seek to be honest and truthful from that place of vulnerability, of seeing where we're planted, versus this place of hubris of I know what's true for everybody, because I don't even know where we get. I don't know how to even have that perspective. But if we can have that humility, then what we bring and what we say, sometimes the first things we start to come out with maybe not very beautiful. The truth is, life is really hard where I am, or I perceive this, or I think this, or I have this thought. So our first attempts at being truthful probably will contain voicing a lot of falsity, a lot of stuff that is, from our perspective, feels true, but we've been conditioned to believe it. Who knows? It will come out messy. But I think we just keep trying, we just hope. I think the process of regeneration or growth creates the possibility of, if our intention is always to be as honest as possible with ourselves and with others, over time, we'll see more and more, you know, and that God's truth, or the Lord, what's the truth that the Lord is giving to us, it's in there. You know, it may just be like a tiny little seed, but I think as long as our intention is for the good or for honesty, my personal belief is that the Lord's truth is always in there somewhere. It's not something, and I think that's important for me, because also I think as a minister, sometimes I've like, well, the truth is what's in the book. The truth is what's in the Bible. The truth is what's the Lord's truth, that somehow that's some fixed thing that holy people get to think about, and that I don't have access to. And I find that that's really changed for me, where that is probably, that belief is what causes religious wars, you know, to believe that the truth is contained in something somewhere outside of what's alive. And what's alive is beings, people, our actual experience being alive. Books are not alive. They're beautiful, and we can make them alive. We can bring them alive. They can give us a place to connect in conversation and in inquiry. They give us a record of really wise beings that existed, that are no longer on the planet. We get to hear what they discovered and thought about, and that's an incredible gift. And we're alive. We're alive. We're the ones who are sharing life right now. So we are the ones who are experiencing God is living in right now. So this is like the news fresh from heaven, is our actual experience with each other.
In the 12th step, we're taught to share our experience, strengths, and hopes, which is pretty much what you're saying, as
Totally.
opposed to telling someone else what the truth is, the so-called truth is, to share your own experience and what works for you. And then they can take whatever they think might work for them. And then it's, you know, it's all good. And so I try to live by that motto as well.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I was one of those that thought I knew everything and had all the answers. And I would love to tell everybody what that was, what they should do. Didn't work very well for me, I have to tell you. So this is much better.
Yeah. My 7-year-old knows everything. Something about 7. I think he just knows everything. He's totally clear on how everything fits together. And pretty soon he's going to be in for a rude awakening.
Boy.
Well, this has been really rich. And what about falsity? So goodness, we are good. Goodness is, the universe is good, is beautiful. We have been created in goodness and love. Goodness is meeting needs, caring, loving. Truth is the form that love and care takes. The understanding of what is useful kind of comes through truth. What about when it all goes to pot? What about falsity? What did you read in here, or what do you think about in terms of seeing falsity around you, or maybe becoming aware of falsity that you yourself have participated in? Or
The first thing that comes to my mind is somewhere in this chapter, he says that when people are in good, even their falsities are accepted by the Lord, as long as they are in good and it's not coming from evil. That's pretty trippy stuff.
vital, isn't it? Vital. I mean, if he hadn't said that, we'd all be in trouble.
I know.
Yeah, that's sort of what allows for all of these. That's what allows for diversity of, you know, we have so many religious traditions. They articulate truth on so many different ways, all of this different stuff. And as long as the intention is good, as long as the good, then it's okay. It's okay to be a little confused. It's okay to.
That's a good way to put it. It's okay to be a little confused.
Yeah.
I really
Yeah.
love it.
I liked when I read that even people of different denominations that are being taught falsities, if it's out of ignorance and they didn't know better, but they still living a life of goodness, that they're also accepted.
Yeah. Well, and he talks in there, I'm going to forget where it was, but I mean, if you think about truth, like we get truth, we come to understand what's true based on our sensory experience of the world and what we're taught. And, you know, we think the sun rises, but like it's just spinning around and we're the ones moving around, you know, that
one.
our senses, and Helen Keller writes beautifully about this, you know, she really calls to question all the sight and hearing people that their senses like really help them to know what's true, because she's like, your senses are fooling you all the time, you know, that our senses are what we perceive from our eyes and our ears and our nose and from our perspective, from what we see. And yet, you know, so what we understand to be true has changed over the course of our evolution as we've gotten a bigger perspective and started to see what's actually going on. And that growth in the scientific world, I think also is mirrored in our own human growth. When we're 7, everything's clear because it all just depends on what I want and what I don't want. But when we're 47, or we start to see, oh, well, I want everyone to get along. So what's that going to take? Or I want there to be, we start to have a bigger perspective. So it's always a little bit false, you know, and that's where like the appearances of truth, that actually all the things we ever say, every word we ever speak about truth, every book we ever write is an appearance of truth. We can't put into words what actually is going on in the universe, right? It's too big. It's too incredible. It's too magnificent. So it's always an appearance. It's always a little bit false, but as long as we're doing our best, you know, as long as we're trying to create a framework that will be good, it's okay. It's okay. Yeah. Yeah. Have either of you had experiences of becoming aware of falsities or having to face?
Oh, yes.
Oh
Yeah. A couple, maybe.
And that is a hard pill to swallow, the truth about yourself and stuff. And for me, that, you know, it started in the 12-step program, working in steps myself and really realizing my role in things and stuff. When I felt justified, I felt victimized and justified, and only to discover that I played a part in all that stuff too. And even with the NVC, you learn what is empathetic and what isn't empathetic. And I did a lot, we all do a lot of things that are really not empathetic, but we have the intention to be helpful, and it's not helpful. And so for me, those are life-changing things, but there were other harder things to acknowledge about myself that were much more life-changing, but much more difficult to come to terms with my own falsities, I
You can
guess.
be so caught up in what it's possible to be so caught up in what you think you need. It's not what you really need. Boy, is it ever not what you, but it feels like it is. And you can get so caught up in that that you put your foot in a lot of deep holes.
Yeah.
Painful revelations and wow.
Yeah.
Necessary, thankful, thank you.
Thank
But
you for that growth experience.
Thanks a lot.
You can also get caught up in emotions that you feel justified to have, like if you believe yourself to be a victim, and you can have these anger issues, or but to be seeing the truth from a different perspective, it changes, and you can realize that you've been doing a manipulation role as well, and not even being so clear about that, and by doing these certain things or having these certain attitudes or mentalities, ways of thinking, which is really hard to deal with too, when you realize that you don't get to be mean at people just because somebody close to you died.
Right.
You know, we tend to, especially like a parent that loses a child, you know, that's the worst thing ever. But some people can use that and be mean to other people. They're taking out their grief for long term. And everybody's like, oh, it's okay. She's had experience this even well into many years. And that's just an extreme example, but other things too, that we can hang on to that, those kinds of feelings as victimness. Because Dr. Phil, used to watch him years ago. He says sometimes there's a payout for people to do that because they get sympathy, they get treated specially, or all this, and they'll cling to this kind of role for too long.
Right. And the truth is they can do that. You can choose to do that.
They can.
And as you become a little bit more aware of what you're doing, you can realize, but do I want to? Do I want to be caught in this? You know, and I think that's, for me, it's like, whatever truth is, whatever is actually going on. And whatever is actually going on, we may have lots of opinions about, but it's actually what's going on. And we can't change it just by having judgments about it. You know, all that is doing is creating something for us, our own suffering. But yeah, every situation and the way we're choosing to respond and the way it's an ecosystem of its own. We're getting something, we're giving something. It's kind of, and really this is why suffering and struggle and challenge, as much as we would wish to avoid all of that, hopefully ultimately we all realize are useful things, because they wake us up. You know, challenges, when our world is shaken, that's when we can start to really question, oh, is this really working for me? Could there be a different way? And I'm convinced this is why forgiveness is so central to the Christian faith. Forgiveness, and I think forgiveness and acceptance are kind of similar. You know, the Eastern traditions may call it acceptance, or what, you know, suffering, what is, but to let it be what it is, and to forgive and to release, that's what brings us to new levels of truth, and that we can always see more. We are always being called to see more of what's true. But to see more, to feel more, to open up to more is going to require a letting go of maybe truth that keeps us comfortable.
It's not to say that those emotions are bad, because they're not. They're necessary to go through that kind of anger and grief when you've been traumatized in some way. I mean, that's natural, but it's just the clinging to it. It becomes a security blanket or something. I don't know how to describe that.
Yeah. I was just speaking. I met with the Harvard chaplains this morning, and one of the women was talking about change and growth and how churches changed and how people change, and that we're called to speak truth kind of like to the level that people can handle it, and that actually we sort of only receive truth maybe to the level that we can incorporate it into our experience, you know, and that kind of ideally, and obviously it doesn't always happen. Sometimes the truth comes in and just knocks us right over and takes all our stuff, but that I think there is a dynamic where we won't even hear it if we can't do anything with it yet, you know. And he mentions that a couple times in here in really beautiful ways, that truth is not just ideas, and it's kind of meaningless if it's just ideas that we're talking about. It's when it becomes grounded in our experience and our sense of how we're acting and the choices that we're making and the way that we're living. That's when it actually has life. Lose my place. We've had some nice exchanges too in the chat around talking more about the rigidity and the flexibility of truth. And Paul mentioned the song, "'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free. 'Tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we will be in the valley of love and delight." And if you do that dance, you're kind of turning, you know, and life is a dance. It's a movement of, and we need the truth, you know, we need structure, but we need to flow. And it, if we're in it, if we're being regenerated, it's always going to be changing. It's always going to be, we're always going to be getting a new perspective. And I don't know about the rest of you. I know I'm just sort of starting my midlife journey, but I just feel like the more I grow, the more I see what a mess I am. the more I see the falsities that I'm caught in, you know, that there's this huge humility that's required to see new things, because every time it's like I'm a much worse person than I was when in my 20s, but I know that's not true. I know that I just had no idea when I was in my 20s. And luckily I have some humans around me that can kind of, my sister in particular, she's like, I like you much more than I did back then. So I know that I'm probably growing and becoming more loving, but all I can see, because my perspective has grown, is all the crap I'm caught up in, and I think, Swedenborg talks about that evils need to come to the surface. We need to, as we grow, we get better at seeing falsity, and I think as a church, that's one, I often have said this in my congregational life, and I think we need to maybe say even louder, just to just support each other in that journey and to remind each other that we're doing good work, even when it starts to seem maybe like it's getting worse, that sometimes it's actually a sign that it's getting better and you're able to hold it better. And I think that that's true as individuals, and sometimes it's true collectively. We face when communities are able to face hard things, that's actually an incredible opportunity to grow together and to move in new directions. If we can keep flexible and not immediately jump into fear that, oh, there's a hard thing happening, this must mean we're not a good church, this must mean I've done something wrong, this must mean any number of stories we might tell. Maybe this just means we're actually growing and we're able to handle telling more of the truth of what's happening right now. And how can we support each other in that? How can we remember that God is in it? I feel like that's important and sucks. It's hard. It's not easy. Especially because as religious people, we want to be in heaven. We want to be good. We want it to be joyful. We want to be loving. How do we hold the reality that goodness and truth are God? That's the heart of God. And yet the truth is we are wrapped up in a lot of falsity. And both are true at the same time. And go ahead, Karen.
Both at the same time.
Yeah.
I was thinking about what you said earlier, Sage, that the truth is what is happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
What the reality. I'm wondering if there's a difference between that reality and truth.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. I'm going to have to spend some time with that.
Mm-hmm.
You started me off someplace there that I'm looking forward to going.
It's a question.
I'll get back.
Yeah, we have more weeks ahead of us to.
Yeah,
to
I'll get back.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's what is true now. And I think it's sort of like what Robin mentioned about her meditation around imagining us all in heaven, like that right now, the sun is in the sky, trees are outside, the birds are chirping. I'm breathing. Like the other thing I sometimes think about is what if I'm just like an alien who just beamed here? Like what would I perceive about my reality? Say I was some, just consciousness, just love without form, and all of a sudden I got to be here. Like what? I'd probably be really excited that I could drink this water and see people. Like I would have probably a much more positive perspective on the gift of the possibility of being alive than I do on a day-to-day when my story is, oh, I have to get to pay, and I have to go do this, and I have to do this.
Well, yeah, and that's like, what if this was if we knew that this was our last day on earth?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. What becomes important now? And why can't we live like that?
I think we maybe can, Karen. I think that's kind of what the whole point of this business is about. Is like dying before we die.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I still have to pick my kids up at 3. Like, obviously,
Yes.
it doesn't wipe out all of the responsibility. We still had to struggle with technology so we could have this conversation. Like it's that both and. It's like, can a part of us realize this might be my last day on earth? Can a part of us live in that primacy of life, of living, where I am really attuned and attentive and grateful for just, I'm pretty excited to be alive. Yeah. While also being aware of the climate crisis and paying attention to your computer and,
it's all real. And right now we're getting slammed in the face with it.
What I was thinking about is this idea kind of about manifesting your reality. What we focus on, we will see. I was in an AA meeting one time, and this kind of came to my mind. And this woman was talking and she was being very negative and she wanted to go on a diet, but she'll probably fail because of this or that or the other thing. And she used words like should, shouldn't, couldn't, didn't, you know, she really set herself up for failure because that's all that she talked about before she even started this. And she was that kind of way about everything. And I said to her that number one is she used words that most people will turn around and run from: shouldn't, wouldn't, couldn't. Those are the words that make you want to do the complete opposite. And that she had set herself up for failure already. And when we focus on the negative, and this has been brought to me in my own thinking at times when I was being negative, you're going to see a lot of it out there in the world because it does exist.
Yeah.
But also it works the opposite. If you focus on what is good in the world, you're going to see a lot of it because that exists as well. So it's sort of like, it's the glass half empty or half full, and how you choose to see things. Yeah, they're both out there. And I can easily watch the news and get so caught up in the global warming and the crime, the killings and the school shootings and all that. And I can get so depressed. I am bawling my eyes out over it. And I have to turn the TV off. And then I have to think about other things. I think the world is magnificently beautiful, and God is the greatest artist of all. When you think about places like the Grand Canyon and all these beautiful mountains and the ocean and the beautiful sky, like Sage had said, it's beautiful. And there's people out there doing really good things to save the planet, to save animals, to help people, human trafficking and all that stuff. So there are a lot of people out there doing good stuff, and there's a lot of people out there doing bad stuff. It's what we choose to focus on. So there are like double realities going on here. There's a reality of the bad stuff and the reality of the good stuff.
Right.
What are we going to focus on?
Right. And those who are really, who we see as great examples of living, are holding both, right? Because they're working to make the world a better place. And if they were just like, everything is great, everything is wonderful, and I'm just in a Zen bliss, then they wouldn't be able to do the practical work. But they have that grounded sense of, I'm going to see the good, they're finding it, and then they're trying to help and be the helpers. You know, Mr. Rogers' great quote, always look for the helpers, you know.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of Desmond Tutu. He said something about you think you can't do anything about global hunger, but he says, yes, you can. He says, you can help this guy. And then he said that the ocean is just drops of water that have all come together. And that's what we are.
Yeah. Yeah. So powerful. This has really been very good. And there's a couple more comments on the stream about just appreciating being alive. And Renee was mentioning how Swedenborg helps us to see that God even uses the falsity, you know, and as we started off, if we have the good, it's okay if we see things a little off. We're going to see things a little off. It's just how it is. And God works with that and can help us. And I would just bring in that I know from my own reflections, trying to think about how to be the church in the world right now, you know, how to really be present and aware of the life around me and within me, and to be attentive to that feels very vital and important, versus being attentive only to kind of the ideas of how it should be. And the truth is, because we're a church organization that's existed for a while, we have ideas about how it should be. We have bylaws, we have, you know, traditions, we have maybe familial expectations. And not to say all of that's bad. It's not. It's been the path we've been on. And we're sort of called to be aware of all of it, and to work towards how we move forward, you know, from what's actually going on, from our consciousness of what's actually happening. And I think, you know, this is where we're starting. This is the foundation of the church, is this goodness within, this truth that we are seeking to live by. And it's in God's hands, and we have glimpses of it. We have our teachers, we have the Bible, we have wise ones around us, you know, helping us to point the way, and just to remember that goodness, that truth is bigger than all of that, more complete, more whole. And one last quote I want to bring in before we end. It's from number 23.8, if anybody's following along. Goodness flows in through an inner way for us, or through the soul, while what is true flows in from the outside through our hearing and sight, and they are joined together within us by the Lord. I found that to be really helpful in terms of the truth is what so, and it's what we experience, and yet to just know this goodness, it's in us, it's flowing in us from God, it's flowing in everybody from God, and how those two meet is where it really gets good. You know, that's where useful action, loving community, church, good church, the new church comes into being as individuals and as a collective. Any last thoughts from you two?
I don't think so.
Me neither. I've just really enjoyed this.
This has been really, really lovely. I'm enjoying this model, and the FaceTime worked, and I'm just so grateful that you guys stuck with us and came back for the conversation today. If you want to be a part of the Zoom conversation in weeks ahead, please get in touch with me and let me know. I know next week, I'm not sure exactly who our lineup is for next week. So if you want to come next week, let me know. But it's kind of a fun model to have a little bit smaller, more intimate conversation and invite everybody else in. And next week we will be moving into the will and the understanding. So still talking about goodness and truth, but from a new angle as we make this all real. So thank you so much, Karen. And thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone online. And we'll see you next Tuesday.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
All right.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Guys.